Hey guys, welcome back to the Checkerboard Chat. This is our second episode. I'm the assistant sports editor Will Backus, and that's the sports editor Blake Von Hagen, and we're going to talk about what happened this week in Tennessee sports and Tennessee football. So last week, Tennessee had a pretty rough game against West Virginia in their season opener in Charlotte. What did you see from them, Blake?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of what we expected going in. The West Virginia's offense was too much for Tennessee's young secondary. And Tennessee's offense, they showed some flashes, but overall, I think the offensive line was probably the most disappointing thing for Tennessee offensively. Starting that first drive, they had a couple negative plays in a row, and then they had a few drives where they got some things going. They had the fourth down conversion, but overall, I would say Pruitt was disappointed with what the offense showed.
Right. The offensive line was a big problem early on. I believe the first 3 plays from scrimmage for Tennessee were negative plays, and the first one was Jarrett Garantano getting blown up and fumbling the ball. And that was just a missed assignment, and that's something that they're going to have to work on. But as the game went on, the offensive line started to gel a bit more. They moved some guys around. They put some new guys in, like Jerome Carvin, who actually had a pretty nice game. And they were able to get the ball moving, at least on the ground. Tim Jordan had 118 yards rushing and a touchdown. He had a standout game, and the offensive line was able to open up a few holes for him. But that's definitely going to be something that they need to work on, especially now that they're not going to have center Brandon Kennedy for the rest of the year.
Yeah, that's a big loss for Tennessee to lose Brandon Kennedy. He's been the guy at center ever since he got here. And to not have him in the rotation, they're going to move Ryan Johnson over to center, who's been taking second string reps, but that means they got to fill in for Ryan Johnson on the line. So, we'll see how they do without Brandon Kennedy. He didn't have the best game against West Virginia, but he was still going to be a crucial part of the offensive line throughout the season. But yeah, I think Tim Jordan was definitely the bright spot. Check out my feature on him. Shameless plug that we ran this week. But Jordan, 118 yards, like you said. He kind of carried the load offensively after Ty Chandler went out. Ty Chandler likely to miss this week, which might not be a big deal in this game, but they definitely want to get him healthy. But Jordan kind of carried the load there. Madre London had a few carries. He didn't do a whole lot, but Jordan was breaking tackles. I heard a lot of references to John Kelly out of Jordan. We'll see if he can keep up that pace moving forward. That would be big for Tennessee if Jordan can carry the load.
Right, they'll need him to step up and perform like he did with 20-plus carries again. Trey Smith said recently that one tackler is not going to get him and 2 tacklers probably won't get him. And, we saw that. He was bowling through people. And that's something we had seen from Tim Jordan before. He played a little bit last season, but he was mostly buried behind John Kelly and then Ty Chandler. But now with Chandler likely out, or if he plays, it'll probably be 1 or 2 snaps, just precautionary, because he's coming back from a concussion and it's ETSU.
I'd be very surprised if he plays.
Right. He'll definitely have to shoulder the load this week again. I wouldn't expect him to get too much more than 20 carries, but I would expect him to probably be the primary guy that comes out there and touches the ball.
Yeah, and you have any other takeaways from the West Virginia game before we start looking forward?
You touched on the secondary, and I think the problem with the Tennessee secondary is that they're young. They played 3 true freshmen there. Alontae Taylor started at corner for most of the game. He's a true freshman. Then Trevon Flowers started at safety for most of the game. He's a true freshman. And they both had bright spots, but they both also got beat. And, Alontae Taylor had the unfortunate task of covering David Sills, which is never easy. And I think given what he had to do, he did a pretty good job. And then Trevon Flowers had a really nice pass breakup. He was there to clean up a couple of tackles. So I think though Will Grier throwing for over 400 yards and 5 touchdowns reflects poorly on Tennessee's secondary, but they're young, and as time moves on, they'll probably get used to the game more because they were playing their first college snaps, so they have to have time to acclimate.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about the young secondary, the freshmen that played, but if you look at the other guys that played, Micah Abernathy and Bailey Buchanan, they didn't play well either. So,
right.
You kind of just got to look at the secondary as a whole. I'll be interested to see if we see Sean Schamberger at all this week. He looked pretty good against Alabama last year. That was his first real playing time he had last season. But it's kind of surprising he didn't get any reps at defensive back last week. So we'll see if he gets some reps against ETSU, which I would expect them to play a lot more guys this week. Try to get more playing time for some of the younger guys, or even guys like Schamberger who didn't see time against West Virginia.
Right, and Schamberger has made the move to safety, which you kind of touched on safety. Mike Abernathy, he did play nickel most of the time, didn't really slide back to safety. He struggled, but so did Nigel Warrior. He didn't show great effort on a couple of tackles, not the Warrior we've seen before that's blowing people up in the secondary. He was named a Bednark Award watch list member, and he didn't really play like one against West Virginia. So I wouldn't be surprised if Tennessee gave younger guys in the secondary at safety more attention, like Sean Schamberger and like Theo Jackson, who I think is a guy that might see significant playing time. In his one big play against West Virginia, he went in there and forced a fumble. That was recovered by Paul Bain. So I would imagine that they might give guys like Jackson and Schamberger a longer look against opponents like ETSU and UTEP, because there's less consequence if they're not performing up to par, but at the same time you might discover that they're going to be the better option than maybe a more veteran guy like Nigel Warrior.
Yeah, and sticking with the defense, we talked about last week a lot going into the game that the outside linebackers needed to create pressure, and they simply weren't really able to do that in the game. Jonathan Kongbo and Darrell Taylor didn't really create any kind of pressure on the outside. Inside linebackers, I think maybe Darren Kirkland Jr. is a bright spot on the defense coming off that injury. How healthy was he going to be? And he looked pretty good. He had 10 tackles, led the team in tackles. So I think that's definitely a positive they can carry forward. So maybe Darren Kirkland Jr. on the defense and Tim Jordan offensively are bright spots moving forward.
Right, and it's good for Tennessee to have Kirkland back. Not only is he a good linebacker, he's just a good leader too. He talked about how he had a ton of emotions coming back and how he tried to fire up his team using those. So it's good to have him back, not only from a field standpoint, but from a leadership standpoint. And he's not the same Darren Kirkland Jr. He still looks like a guy that's coming back from a knee injury, so I expect him, having 10 tackles against West Virginia, I'd expect him to still get better as the season goes on while he's still kind of knocking the rust off, because he didn't play pretty much all of last year.
Right.
So he's still coming back from a year of not playing football. He doesn't look as explosive as he used to, but I would expect him to get that back, and that needs to happen for Tennessee, because they need someone in that front seven to step up and make plays, because they really didn't against West Virginia. They struggled to get pressure. They had a few snaps where they got pressure. Shai Tuttle was the only guy with a sack, and he had one.
I think he looked pretty good in the game, too. He made a couple other plays along with the sack.
Right, but as you mentioned, the outside linebackers really need to start playing better. Taylor and Kongbo weren't able to get a whole lot of pressure. There was one play where Taylor was able to get through, and he got held. So he might have gotten a sack on that play if he hadn't gotten held. But other than that, they really weren't there a lot. They really need to step it up if Tennessee is going to have a successful SEC slate, especially with the tough schedule that they have.
Yeah, when you switch to a 3-4 defense, you definitely want to see those guys that are defensive ends at heart. You want to see those guys be able to create pressure, because that's basically what their role is there as outside linebackers, to create pressure, especially when you're playing a quarterback like Will Grier. But one other thing I wanted to kind of touch on from that game is coaching. Jeremy Pruitt in his first career game as a head coach. One thing that kind of stood out that was highlighted by his players, they talked about a lot after the game, was going for it on that fourth down. When they're down 10-0 and they convert that and score a touchdown. Dominic Wood-Anderson touchdown reception. So the players really seem to be supportive of that decision. They like a coach that has the guts to go for it there. Besides that, I thought coming out in the second half, Pruitt didn't make a whole lot of adjustments, and that kind of bit Tennessee. West Virginia looked a lot better coming out of the second half after that hour weather delay. And they just seem to be the better team. Maybe part of that is just wearing down a young team, and maybe they were just the better team, so that's going to happen. But I thought, if you're a Tennessee fan, you want to see Pruitt make some more adjustments.
Right. I thought mostly on the offense, they didn't make a whole lot of adjustments. I felt like the offense had a plan, and they stuck to it. They wanted to run the ball, and they wanted to bleed the clock, and that's fine, but when you start falling behind against a team like West Virginia, like they come out in the second half and score immediately, and you're down 20-7. And then you give the ball over to them and they score again, and you're down 27-7. And suddenly the game opens up, and they still kind of stuck to that plan of keeping the ball on the ground and getting these short little gains. Tyson Helton not only said that he wants to bleed the clock, but that he wants to chuck the ball down the field. And they didn't do that a lot. Garantano only had a couple passes that went over 25 yards, and both of them fell incomplete. He didn't have a whole lot of time to throw deep, but at the same time, there weren't a whole lot of plays drawn up where he took shots. So I think that the offense especially needs to open up the playbook moving forward if they want to have success against the SEC opponents that they'll face. We might see that against ETSU. We might not. They might try to conserve the playbook, but I think that their play calling needs to get. I think they just need to do a better job of adapting. And again, it was their first game as a staff, so you can kind of give them a pass, but they really need to adjust quickly, and they need to open up the playbook more.
Yeah, and speaking of first-year head coaches, Tennessee will be playing against Randy Sanders, who's in his first year as head coach at ETSU. They earned a win last week against Mars Hill, a Division II school. It was actually tied in the third quarter, so ETSU, obviously, they're going to have some first-year struggles there. Randy Sanders, a guy that played for Tennessee and then coached at Tennessee for over 20 years, coached at Florida State. Fun fact on him, he was actually the only person to be involved in the first BCS National Championship win and the last BCS National Championship win with Tennessee and then Florida State. So he made an interesting comment this week. I don't know if you saw it. He said that he would go commando and run home with the goalpost over his shoulder if they pull off the upset. So maybe that's something to look forward to.
Maybe. I don't see ETSU pulling off an upset, but you never know. It would definitely be a sight to see. But yeah, you talked about Randy Sanders. He has a pretty good resume as just a coach. He was the offensive coordinator in 98 and 99 when Tennessee won their national championship. And he was the offensive coordinator in 2013 when Florida State won the national championship. He's been around some great quarterbacks like Jameis Winston and T. Martin. And he was even a coach at Tennessee when Peyton Manning was there, although I believe he was the running backs coach. So he's got a very impressive resume of developing guys, mostly in offense. Not only that, he's worked with Pruitt before. Pruitt was a defensive coordinator at Florida State in 2013 when they won that national championship. So they go back. Pruitt had a lot of great things to say about Randy Sanders. He called him a great coach, a great guy, and an average golfer. So we'll see how Randy Sanders responds to being in Neyland again, and I don't think it'll be a close game, but I definitely would love to see Randy Sanders go commando carrying a goalpost all the way back to Johnson City.
He's waited a long time to get his shot as a head coach, and now he finally has it. So we'll see if he can work his way up, maybe get a better job in the future. But looking at ETSU from last season, I don't know how much of a connection there will be since they have a new coach and everything. But last year, they were definitely a run-heavy team. They ran the ball about twice as much as they passed the ball. They only threw for about 200 yards a game, so they were definitely a run-heavy team. And then on defense, they gave up a lot on the ground. So maybe that's something for Tennessee to look forward to. Tim Jordan, maybe you could have another 100-plus yard game. Audrey London could get some snaps, and some of the younger guys as well.
Right, and I was looking a little bit at the Mars Hill versus ETSU stats before this, and their quarterback did throw for, I believe, 230-some-odd yards and 3 touchdowns. So maybe they are airing it out a little bit more this year with Randy Sanders, and that wouldn't surprise me at all with the way he's called plays in the past. But again, it's just such a hard matchup for an FCS team to come into Neyland Stadium against the Tennessee Volunteers and walk out with a win. I think Tennessee will probably have to exploit that weak run defense and I would also expect Garantano to maybe take some shots. They might want to see if that's something the coaching staff might want to see if that's something they can do moving forward. I feel like we talked about West Virginia being a bit of a test run for a bunch of new stuff for Tennessee, but I feel like ETSU more so will be. Definitely. Just because they're an FCS opponent that has only had a football program recently for about 4 years. They revived it in 2014 after not having one for 10 years. So I think ETSU will be maybe more of a trial run where Tennessee might try out some new stuff. They might have Garantano throw it down the field more because it seems to be lower risk than sacrificing against a West Virginia team that was ranked number 17.
Yeah, and last season ETSU played against James Madison, who ended up winning the FCS championship. I think they lost 52-7 in that game, and then they also played Chattanooga, who Tennessee's familiar with, and that was a 10-3 Chattanooga win. Just looking at a few stats from last season, they seemed to keep it close in the first half. It was kind of an even score in the first and second quarters, but in the third quarter, ETSU gave up 100 points combined in third quarters, only scored 33. So maybe, coming out in the second half, who knows if Tennessee will still have Garantano in the game at that point. Maybe you could see Keller Chris to start the second half. Regardless, if you look at last season, that's a point where Tennessee could take over the game.
Right. I don't think it'll be close at any point. I think Tennessee is probably going to establish a pretty dominant presence early. And I think we will see Keller Chris play a significant amount of time because Pruitt said even after the West Virginia game, after Garantano had an impressive performance against West Virginia, given what he had, he still said Chris will see playing time and that he will play against ETSU. So I think Garantano will probably play the entire first half, but it would not be at all surprising to see Chris trot out there at the beginning of the third quarter to lead Tennessee's offense, because I think Tennessee does want to take a look at him in a game time situation, because I still honestly think they may not be decided on who is the starter moving forward. I still think it'll be Garantano, but it'll be good for them to get a look at Chris in a game time situation extended.
Yeah, definitely. I think these next 2 weeks, you got UTEP coming up after ETSU. I think these are both kind of trial runs as you look forward to the Florida game. Pruitt's going to try to figure out as much as he can about his team in these 2 weeks, combined with what he learned from the West Virginia game, and then see what his lineup's going to look like playing against Florida. Obviously, that's going to be one of the biggest games of the year for Tennessee. So as we kind of wrap up with the football conversation, it's ETSU week for multiple Tennessee teams. The volleyball team suffered their first loss of the season the other day as they fell in 5 sets at ETSU. ETSU was a tournament team last year, so not a bad loss for Tennessee, but it is their first one of the season. They're now 6-1.
It's not a huge cause for concern for the volleyball team, I don't believe. They had to go on the road. It was their first game on the road. Again, it was against an ETSU team that made the NCAA tournament last year, like you said. They took them to 5 sets. It's not a huge cause for concern for Eve Rackham in her first year. They're still 6-1. They still beat Michigan State. They still won 2 straight tournaments. So I don't think that there is any reason that people should get upset about Tennessee losing to a good ETSU team on the road, and I don't think it's a bad sign for Tennessee in the future. It's just kind of one of those games that maybe a little bit of a wake-up call for them.
Yeah, I think it's a disappointing loss, too, because you're up 2-1 after 3 sets, and then you lose the 4th set, you have the 5th set, you play to 15, they're up 7-0 to start, and then they kind of fall apart and lose that one. So I think the way they lost might be more disappointing than the actual loss itself. Then the soccer team will be playing, we're filming on Thursday, they'll be playing tonight against ETSU. That's also on the road. They're 4-0-1 right now.
I believe so.
So they're going to look to stay unbeaten against ETSU in that one.
Tennessee soccer is, I believe they're up to number 9 now.
Number 9 in the country.
I believe they're still the second-ranked SEC team in the nation. I would expect them to go on the road against ETSU and get another win. At 6-0-1 right now, they're playing some very good soccer. They've got a very potent defense. They've held multiple opponents scoreless. I believe every game at home so far has been scoreless for the opponent. They've got an excellent goalkeeper in Shea Yanez, who had, I believe, 3 saves in their last game. So their defense is potent, and then they've got a great offensive attack to pair with it, even without one of their stars in Khadijah Shaw, who's with the Jamaican national team right now. They've got Amy Thompson, a freshman, who has had a very good season. They've got other pieces. They still got Katie Cousins there, who I believe only has 1 goal this season, but she's still an excellent player that could break out at any point. So I believe the soccer team will go on the road against ETSU and take care of business, and they'll likely keep rolling.
All right, well, that's it for this time. Make sure you follow us on all social media. We'll have plenty of stories from the ETSU game, and we'll be back next week to wrap up the ETSU game and to preview the UTEP game. Thanks for watching.